He was a whole man, and he became part of American history, not just sports history.
Howard Cosell wasn't just a sports broadcaster, he was a walking headline. The man had a voice that could cut through a stadium's roar, and an attitude that could cut even deeper. He never played it safe. If something was wrong in the world of sports, Cosell wouldn't just hint at it. He'd call it out, live, for millions to hear. That fearless streak made him a legend to some and a troublemaker to others. Fans saw him as the guy who refused to kiss up to the powers that be. But that same sharp tongue that made him famous eventually drew blood, his own. It all came crashing down on a September night when one off-the-cuff remark didn't just spark outrage, it set off a firestorm. The fallout was swift, brutal, and unforgiving. By the end of it, Cosell wasn't just in hot water, he was out of the job. So what exactly did he say that crossed the line so badly it ended his career? Let's rewind to that night and unpack how a single moment brought down one of sports broadcasting's loudest voices. From courtrooms to commentary booths, Howard Cosell wasn't just another voice on the radio. He was a presence you couldn't ignore. Born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to accountant Isidore Cohen and his wife Nellie, Cosell grew up in a world that balanced tradition and ambition. His roots ran deep. The grandson of a rabbi raised in Brooklyn, New York, he carried a legacy of intellect and resilience. Even his name carried history. Cosell explained that he had changed it from Cohen while in law school, a nod to his father and grandfather, returning to a version of the family's original Polish name. Service called during World War II, and Cosell answered. From 1942 to 1945, he served in the Army Transportation Corps, earning an honorable discharge with the rank of major. The discipline and boldness he honed in those years would later define his broadcasting style: unflinching, uncompromising, and impossible to ignore. Cosell's entry into broadcasting began quietly but with ambition. In the early 1950s, he ran a sports radio show, recording early mornings while sharpening the voice that would later cut through stadium noise like a knife. He was relentless. Ned Garver, recalling a 1951 interview, remembered Cosell claiming that guests on his show received no gifts, only to later discover that Cosell kept them for himself. It was a small controversy, a hint of the audacity that would follow him his entire career. In 1953, representing the Little League of New York, Cosell caught the attention of Hal Neal, then president of ABC Radio. Neal asked him to host a show on WABC featuring Little League participants, a modest start that laid the groundwork for a lifelong relationship with ABC. For 3 years, Cosell hosted without pay, balancing law studies with early morning recordings, before deciding that his future lay in the microphone, not the courtroom. He pitched a weekly show to ABC Radio's president, Robert Pauley, who doubted the investment would pay off. Cosell returned undeterred, armed with a sponsor from a relative's shirt company, and Speaking of Sports was born. From there, Cosell's career accelerated, fueled by a voice that refused to mince words. Teaming with ex-Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher Ralph Branca on WABC's New York Mets broadcasts in the 1960s, he pulled no punches, calling out players and management alike. His commentary cut through the gloss of sports reporting, offering listeners honesty, sometimes harsh, always unflinching. While his television presence grew, anchoring sports at WABC TV from 1961 to 1974, he never abandoned radio. Speaking of Sports became Speaking of Everything, a platform where Cosell could tackle sports, culture, and the world beyond, always on his own terms. Every step of the way, Howard Cosell was building more than a career. He was crafting a reputation. A man who spoke without filters, whose commentary could elevate a hero or expose a flaw he became impossible to ignore. That unflinching voice, the very thing that made him feared and celebrated, would find its ultimate proving ground in a relationship that captured the nation's attention: his connection with Muhammad Ali. Cosell's relationship with Muhammad Ali? They were a 1960s power couple, two hyper-talkative showmen who seemed to orbit each other despite their stark differences. Muhammad Ali, the African-American boxer born with a slave name, and Howard Cosell, the Jewish Brooklyn lawyer who found his calling in sportscasting. Cosell never shied away from controversy. And perhaps no moment tested him more than when he publicly defended Ali after the New York State Boxing Commission stripped the boxer of his title in 1967 when Ali claimed conscientious objector status to the draft. At the time, Cosell declared that what the government had done to Ali was inhuman and illegal under the 5th and 14th Amendments, pointing out that nobody criticized professional football players who dodged the draft. But Ali was treated differently because he was black and outspoken. ABC, Cosell's network, was flooded with hate mail and threatening calls. Some of the letters even demanded that the network remove the N-loving Jew from the air. Cosell had begun rising to national prominence in the early 1960s while covering Ali, back when the boxer still fought under his birth name, Cassius Clay. From the start, there was a strange but undeniable affinity between the two men. They complemented each other in broadcasts, Ali with his brash, magnetic personality, and Cosell with his sharp intellect and unflinching honesty. When Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali, Cosell was one of the first sportscasters to use it consistently, standing firmly by the boxer during his refusal to be inducted into the military. Cosell also became a vocal supporter of Olympic sprinters John Carlos and Tommy Smith after they raised their fists in a Black Power salute at the 1968 Mexico City Games. At a time when most sports broadcasters avoided political or racial controversy and maintained a polite distance from athletes, Cosell thrived on the opposite approach, building a reputation around his blunt motto, "He was just telling it like it is." Cosell's style transformed American sports broadcasting. Before him, commentators were mostly known for colorful play-by-play or witty banter. Cosell brought analysis, historical context, and intellectual rigor, moving television sports coverage closer to hard news reporting. Yet, his distinctive staccato voice, accent, and cadence became their own kind of spectacle, a form of commentary that was unmistakably Cosell. The moment Cosell earned the most public attention was during Ali's exile. After the heavyweight title was stripped, Cosell defended Ali relentlessly, and years later he was vindicated when he got to inform the boxer that the United States Supreme Court had ruled unanimously in Ali's favor in Clay v. United States. Cosell then called most of Ali's fights immediately before and after Ali's return from a 3-year hiatus in October 1970. Though the broadcasts were often delayed on tape by a week for closed-circuit television audiences. Interestingly, Cosell did not call two of Ali's biggest bouts, the Rumble in the Jungle in 1974 and the first Ali-Frazier fight in 1971. Promoter Jerry Perenchio had chosen actor Burt Lancaster, who had never provided color commentary for boxing, to work alongside longtime announcer Don Dunphy and former light heavyweight champion Archie Moore. Cosell attended the fights as a spectator, but later recorded a voiceover for ABC when the bouts were shown before the second Ali-Frazier match in 1974. Perhaps his most legendary call came during Ali's 1973 fight against George Foreman in Kingston, Jamaica. When Foreman knocked Frazier to the mat 6 times in the first round, Cosell's unforgettable cry of "Down goes Frazier" became one of the most quoted phrases in American sports history. Foreman eventually won the match by TKO in the second round to claim the World Heavyweight Championship, but Cosell's call immortalized the moment. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, Cosell provided blow-by-blow commentary for some of boxing's most memorable matches. He covered Ken Norton's upset over Ali in 1973, and Ali's third recapturing of the heavyweight title against Leon Spinks in 1978. His signature toupee even became part of the spectacle when it was knocked off during a scuffle between Scott Ledoux and Johnny Boudreau. Cosell retrieved it with quick efficiency, and Ali, never missing a chance to tease, would joke that the hairpiece resembled a squirrel, a rabbit, or even the tail of a pony. Cosell played along, but he never allowed Ali to touch it. For over 30 years, they played their roles to perfection. Cosell as the pompous commentator, and Ali with just the right needle to puncture that pomposity. Yet beneath the banter, there was genuine respect and affection, especially when Ali felt slighted by others. The two were close, almost like two peas in a pod. And in a touching moment at Ali's 50th birthday in 1992, just a few years before Cosell died, the sportscaster came to the podium to honor his friend, He reportedly said that he had enjoyed all the years and all the times they had shared together, calling Ali a very special man with a very special meaning to all of the American people. He added that it was his honor to acknowledge him by his chosen name, Muhammad Ali. When Howard Cosell passed away in April 1995, Muhammad Ali released a statement that captured the depth of their bond. He reportedly said he hoped to meet Cosell in the hereafter, imagining his friend greeting him with a teasing, "Muhammad, you're not the man you used to be." Their friendship, although forged through controversy, confrontation, and mutual respect, left an indelible mark on sports, media, and culture. They were in every sense a duo that redefined how the world watched and understood the fight game, not just in the ring but outside it as well. And though with Ali we always saw the good and funny part of Cosell, the man always had a habit of ruffling feathers. Howard Cosell's infamous feuds. If there was anyone built for feuds, it was Howard Cosell. When Monday Night Football first hit the airwaves in 1970, Roone Arledge knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted sparks, and he got them. In one corner was Cosell, the sharp-tongued, self-assured former lawyer who treated sports commentary like a courtroom cross-examination. In the other was Dandy Don Meredith, the former Dallas Cowboys quarterback whose sly grin and slow Texas drawl could charm an audience like a magician pulling coins from the air. Between them sat Frank Gifford, trying and often failing to keep the peace. Cosell liked to tell audiences that if Meredith wore the white hat, he would wear the black one, and he meant it. Their back and forth became the engine of the show. Meredith would toss out a folksy quip, and Cosell would pounce with something cutting, clever, and slightly superior. Viewers couldn't get enough. It was electric. But a live wire only stays thrilling if you handle it carefully. Left unchecked, it could burn. And sometimes it did. The burn arrived in September 1983, during a game featuring Washington's Alvin Garrett. Watching Garrett weave through defenders, Cosell referred to him as a little monkey, and the words detonated immediately. The remark ignited a firestorm. Civil rights leaders demanded his head, newspapers screamed about racism, and the nation argued over whether it was an innocent metaphor or something far uglier. Cosell dug in, insisting he had used the same phrase before for white players like Mike Adamill and had meant nothing racial by it. But in the booth that night, Meredith could only mutter an awkward, halting agreement, leaving the tension to hang thick, like the humidity on a Texas summer evening. Off-camera, things weren't always smoother. Cosell had a reputation for overindulging during broadcasts. One notorious night, he stumbled, woozy, and vomited right on Meredith's cowboy boots before vanishing from the booth mid-game. Meredith, ever the professional, had to keep the commentary rolling as if nothing had happened. Behind the scenes, though, moments like these eroded patience, building an invisible wall between the two men. By 1974, the cracks were undeniable. Meredith was tired of the circus, tired of constant verbal jousting, tired of being Dandy Don on cue every Monday night. He had made his money, made his mark, and was itching for a quieter life. NBC dangled acting opportunities and a fresh start, and Meredith didn't need much encouragement. His exit wasn't simply a resignation. It was a strategic retreat. Roone Arledge tried to lure him back with promises and pay raises, but Meredith had already tipped his hat and ridden off, leaving Cosell behind with the spotlight all to himself. Their years together were a paradox, a mix of magic and mayhem. Without their love-hate rhythm, Monday Night Football might never have become the cultural juggernaut it was. They fought, they needled, they clashed, but they also made each other unforgettable. Even after Meredith left, fans couldn't stop talking about the odd couple who had turned a football broadcast into a must-see theater. Cosell's feuds weren't limited to the booth. He frequently clashed with Dick Young, the longtime New York Daily News sports columnist, who rarely missed a chance to make mockery of Cosell in print, calling him an ass, a shill, or most often, Howie the Fraud. Young even went so far as to stand near Cosell during broadcasts and shout profanities, deliberately rendering the audio unusable for his radio show. Sports writer Jimmy Cannon once wrote that Cosell had changed his name, donned a toupee, and tried to convince the world he tells it like it is. Cannon added that if Cosell were a sport, he would be roller derby. Messy, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. Those who worked with Cosell often had no illusions about his personality. Veteran ABC racecaster Chris Economaki described him as having an enormous and monumental ego, and said Cosell may have been the most pompous man he had ever met. Cosell didn't let mistakes go unnoticed either. During an interview with Cale Yarborough, he ripped Economaki for a miscue and made sure the reporter remembered it. At an ABC Christmas party, Economaki's wife asked to be introduced to Cosell, and Economaki, only half joking, explained that his wife wanted to meet him for some inexplicable reason. Cosell, true to form, took it personally, visibly annoyed by the offhand remark. Cosell thrived on conflict, both on-screen and off. His wit and fearless approach to commentary could enrage colleagues, provoke viewers, and dominate headlines. But that same fire is what made him unforgettable. He didn't just report sports. He made the world watch differently, think differently, and occasionally squirm. Love him or loathe him, Howard Cosell made a career out of the heat he generated, and for better or worse, he never played it safe. And for all the antics he occasionally pulled on live TV, his love life was surprisingly quiet and without as much drama. Howard Cosell's long-lasting marriage. Howard Cosell never did anything halfway, whether it was a broadcast, a feud, or falling in love. Long before his booming baritone rattled living rooms across America, he had already made a commitment that would outlast every contract, every headline, and every fight. In 1944, he married Mary Edith Abrams. Mary wasn't impressed by his charm, nor intimidated by his sharp tongue. She was measured where Howard was combustible and refined where he was brash. To outsiders, they might have seemed an odd pairing. He, the scrappy Brooklyn lawyer with a chip on his shoulder, and she, the daughter of a respected accountant. But they fit together in the way only two opposites who secretly need each other can. Their love wasn't the kind that played out in clubs or gossip pages. It was quieter, built in the small, intimate moments of everyday life. Late-night dinners after his endless days working, car rides where he ranted about sports politics while she let him get it all out, and the unspoken understanding that she would shield their home from the chaos of his career. Mary raised their daughters, Jill and Hillary, while Howard poured himself into every broadcast as if it were a heavyweight fight. In public, Cosell could be a hammer, cutting, relentless, the man who didn't care whose toes he stepped on. Behind closed doors with Mary, however, he revealed a softness few ever witnessed. Friends noticed it in the little things, the way his eyes would find her in a crowded room, how his voice softened when he spoke to her, and the way she could pull him back from the edge with just a look. She was the calm to his storm, the anchor that kept him steady amid the swirling chaos of his fame. That marriage was his anchor for 46 years. When Mary died in 1990, it knocked the air out of him. The fire in his voice, the one that had carried him through decades of controversy and acclaim, seemed to burn lower. In his book, Cosell admitted that Mary was his life, reporting that he went nowhere without her, not to Monday Night Football, not on travel, not even across the Triborough Bridge. Both his health and his career faltered in her absence. He still argued, still jabbed, still filled rooms with his presence. But without Mary in the wings, it was as if the performance had lost its finest audience. Even amid grief, the depth of their bond remained clear. Colleagues and friends noticed how often he would pause mid-sentence, his thoughts drifting, as if reaching for her counsel or her understanding. The world knew Cosell as fiery, unflinching, and indomitable. But those who knew the private man understood that Mary had been the tether holding the hurricane together. Without her, the roar was still there, but the heart behind it beat a little slower, the rhythm a little less certain. Even at the height of his career, and long before the devastating loss of Mary, Cosell's life was defined by moments that demanded both heart and courage. His voice could fill a stadium. Yet beneath that unflinching public image was a man shaped by conviction and empathy, qualities that would come to the forefront on one of television's most unforgettable nights. The John Lennon controversy. One of Howard Cosell's most unforgettable and controversial moments came on the night of December 8, 1980, during a Monday Night Football game between the Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots. In the midst of live play-by-play, Cosell stunned viewers by interrupting the broadcast to deliver a news bulletin. John Lennon had been shot. The news had reached Cosell and Frank Gifford near the end of the game, passed along by Roone Arledge, who was then president of ABC's News and Sports divisions. Cosell was hesitant at first, unsure whether it was the right moment to break such shocking news. Off the air, he confided in Gifford and others, admitting that he wasn't certain the game situation allowed for a news flash. Gifford reassured him, insisting that it was a tragic moment that would resonate across the world and that the announcement had to be made. On air, Gifford prefaced the moment, emphasizing that no matter what was happening on the field, the news had to be shared. Cosell agreed, acknowledging that, as tragic as it was, the game itself was secondary. He reported that ABC News in New York had confirmed the tragedy. John Lennon, outside his West Side apartment, had been shot twice in the back and rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, where he was dead on arrival. Cosell admitted on air that it would be hard to return to the game after such a newsflash. But in keeping with his duty, the announcement had to be made. At the time, details were still unclear. Lennon had actually been shot 4 times and had not been pronounced dead on arrival, but Cosell relayed the information as it was known to ABC News at the moment. The gravity of the announcement was heightened by the fact that Lennon had once appeared on Monday Night Football back on December 9, 1974, when he was interviewed by Cosell during a short breakaway segment after the Washington Redskins' 23-17 win over the Los Angeles Rams. ABC's scoop had come through an unlikely coincidence. An ABC employee, Alan Weiss, happened to be at the emergency room where Lennon was brought. This accidental connection allowed ABC to report the shooting, though it technically violated Yoko Ono's request to delay any news until she could tell their son, Sean, herself. Sean, only 5 years old at the time, was thankfully asleep and unaware of the events, allowing Ono to break the news personally. Despite ABC's efforts, NBC had technically beaten them to the punch by interrupting The Tonight Show just minutes before Cosell's announcement with its own breaking news segment. The moment showed Cosell's fearless approach. He did not hesitate to mix sports with real-life tragedy, no matter how shocking or controversial. In that instant, viewers saw Cosell not just as the irreverent, sharp-tongued broadcaster, but as a conduit for a moment of collective national grief, forced to balance the absurdity of sports with the unthinkable reality beyond the stadium lights. The one statement that got Howard Cosell fired. By the early 1980s, Howard Cosell had fought his way to the top of sports broadcasting, and everywhere he went, he left a mark, sometimes a bruise. He was the booming, nasal voice America either loved or couldn't stand, the man who had made Monday Night Football more than just a game. His commentary wasn't filler between plays. It was theater, confrontation, and sometimes provocation. For years, Cosell had thrived on the edge, wielding his sharp tongue like a weapon and daring anyone, athlete, coach, or viewer to challenge him. But by the turn of the decade, the years of combat were catching up to him. It wasn't the late nights or the endless flights that were wearing him down. It was the constant battles. Some fights he went looking for. Others landed on his doorstep without invitation, and all of them seemed to demand more energy than they once had. Then, in 1983, came the moment that would change everything. The one statement that would be replayed, debated, and dissected until it felt bigger than the man himself. During a Monday Night Football broadcast, Washington's Alvin Garrett caught a pass and darted downfield. Watching him on the screen, Cosell remarked in his familiar cadence, "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" It was a phrase Cosell had used for years, one he often said affectionately about his grandchildren and even about white players in previous broadcasts. But this time was different. Garrett was black, and the social climate was less forgiving. In living rooms across America, the words hit differently. Within hours, phone lines lit up at ABC. Newspapers splashed the remark across headlines. Civil rights leaders condemned him. Fans demanded an apology or his job. Cosell insisted there had been no malice, that anyone who knew him knew his meaning. Garrett himself publicly defended him, and Muhammad Ali, Cosell's longtime friend, said the outrage was misplaced. But the tidal wave of criticism didn't slow. The nuance was lost in the noise. For Cosell, it wasn't just a PR problem, it was a wound. This was a man who prided himself on being fearless, on speaking the truth as he saw it. But now the truth was irrelevant. Perception had taken over. That season would be his last on Monday Night Football. The truth was, he'd already been stepping back from another sport he had once defined. Just a year earlier, in December 1982, Cosell had sat ringside for a heavyweight bout between Larry Holmes and Randall Tex Cobb. The fight was a mismatch from the opening bell, a punishing display in which Holmes battered Cobb mercilessly. As the rounds dragged on, Cosell grew disgusted. He later told colleagues he was tired of the hypocrisy and sleaziness of the boxing world. That night, he walked away from calling fights for good. If Cosell thought leaving boxing and Monday Night Football would give him peace, he was wrong. In 1985, he detonated another bomb, this time by choice. His autobiography, I Never Played the Game, was less a memoir than a scorched-earth account of his industry. He named names, criticized colleagues, and described the backroom politics of sports broadcasting with cutting precision. Some readers admired the candor. Many in the business did not. Doors that had once swung open for him began to close. Jobs dried up. People who had toasted his fearlessness now whispered that he was impossible. ABC canceled his award-winning but short-lived show SportsBeat after only 3 months. With television turning cold, Cosell returned to where he had started, radio. There, behind a microphone, he delivered his daily sportscast, Speaking of Sports, and his weekly interview show, Speaking of Everything. For nearly a decade, it was his last stronghold. But the Howard Cosell of the 1990s wasn't the same man who had once needled Ali or sparred with coaches on live TV. His health was quietly, steadily declining. A longtime smoker, he was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1991 and underwent surgery to remove a tumor. Minor strokes followed, along with heart disease, kidney problems, and Parkinson's. The man who had out-argued everyone from athletes to network executives was now confronting an opponent he couldn't out-talk, his own body. In 1992, he stepped away from broadcasting entirely. Even in retirement, the honors kept coming. In 1993, he was inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. The following year, he entered the Television Hall of Fame. And in 1995, he was named the recipient of the Arthur Ashe Courage Award, though he didn't attend the ceremony. Bill Cosby, a close friend at the time, accepted it on his behalf. But long before those accolades, the personal blows had started to pile up. In 1990, his wife of 46 years, Mary Edith Emmy Abrams Cosell, died of a heart attack. Without her, the center of his world was gone. He largely withdrew from public life, turning down invitations, avoiding old colleagues, and refusing to be part of the sports circus he had once dominated. On April 23, 1995, Howard Cosell died at the Hospital for Joint Diseases in Manhattan of a cardiac embolism. He was 77 years old. He left behind 2 daughters, 5 grandchildren, and a legacy that defies easy categorization. For some, he was the ultimate truth-teller, a man who refused to play nice in a world built on smiles and handshakes. For others, he was abrasive, arrogant, and out of touch. And yet, when people remember Howard Cosell, they remember the sound of his voice, confident, unyielding, and unwilling to be background noise. His career was built on moments that sparked debate and drew headlines. Moments like the Alvin Garrett remark that could topple a man even at the height of his powers. He didn't fade away quietly. He left on his own terms, still believing that his greatest asset was the same thing that had brought him down: the conviction to say exactly what he thought, no matter the cost. Were you ever a fan of Howard Cosell? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.